97underground.com, Baltimore's pure rock.
Hello, this is Michael Spedden, and thanks for joining us today on the 97underground.com Michael Spedden Interviews channel here on YouTube. There have been many requests from both listeners and guests for us to make available our artist interviews so they can listen again or share with others. You can find us on YouTube at 97underground Michael Spedden. Remember, the Back of the Rack, the Michael Spedden Show, can be heard on 97underground.com every Tuesday from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern. Not only do I feature artist interviews, I feature songs you forgot you liked, classics that never die, beloved local, regional, up-and-coming, and underground artists. You can listen anytime, anywhere by downloading our free app from 97underground.com. Just do it. And now, today's episode. And welcome back to the Back of the Rack, the Michael Spedden Show here on 97underground.com, Baltimore's pure rock worldwide. Today we have an interview with Steve Lynch from Autograph. He wrote a book called Confessions of a Rock Guitarist. It's a great autobiography. It takes place from his early days as a young kid back in the 60s all the way through today, and talks about the Van Halen tours, the Motley Crue tours, being out with Aerosmith and Bryan Adams and Dio and Hart. And I mean, he has been through so many different things, so many adventures over the years. It was just a really, really great read. And I think you all will enjoy it too. Confessions of a Rock Guitarist, available on Amazon.com and wherever you can get books online. So without further ado, just remember the Back of the Rack is on every Tuesday from 4 to 6 p.m. Our replay is every Wednesday from 2 to 4 a.m. You can also download our free app, the 97underground.com app, and listen to us anytime, anywhere, as well as finding all of our interviews on YouTube, youtube.com/@97underground Michael Spedden. So without further ado, here is Steve Lynch. And welcome back to the Back of the Rack, the Michael Spedden Show here on 97underground.com, Baltimore's pure rock worldwide. And today, a very special guest. We have the author of Confessions of a Rock Guitarist. Oh, it's a great new book that's just come out from Steve Lynch. Steve Lynch, guitarist from Autograph. And what a great read, Steve. I tell you, I've thoroughly enjoyed reading your book. Some really great stories in there. And I got to tell you, I think you've probably lived about 5 lives. The ratio of what you've lived through compared to most people on Earth is probably about 5 to 1. So,
right.
And where do we begin? I mean, we could begin at the beginning in this book here, but I mean, there's just so much in here that's just incredible. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
On a great job, first of all. And
thank you.
So just, I guess, tell us a bit about putting this all together. I mean, that must have been a task in itself, I guess, huh?
Yeah, it was. What happened was, through the years, I've had all these stories that happened to me, all these different unpredictable things, just bizarre stuff happening left and right, as you've read. And so I basically was telling these stories to different family members, to friends and fans and everything. And people kept telling me, you've got to write a book on your life. It's just so fascinating. You've got to write a book. So what I started to do, actually maybe 10 years ago, was I started to write down single sentence reminders of all these different stories. And I remembered these stories because I had told them so many times. And so what I did was I had about 200 sentences, and that was too much for a book. I mean, I could easily have written, 500-page book, but that wasn't realistic. So when COVID hit, I decided this is the time, because I couldn't teach, I couldn't play live, I couldn't even go into the studio, because everything was shut down. And so I thought, this is the time where I'm going to start writing the book. And I did. March of 2020, I started writing it. And I just kept writing and writing, and it was pretty much finished by the time the COVID ended. And then I signed a deal with a publishing company, but then there was delays and everything because everybody was behind because of COVID. And then I did some more edits on the book because a lot more stuff kept happening, like the whole the whole thing with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
happened. And then also, and I met my fiance now, and we got engaged with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And so I met her again after we met on early in the Van Halen tour back in '84. And so then I re-met with her 4 years ago.
Hmm.
The 21st of this month, actually. And from that time, from 1984, we lost contact because she was going off to college, and I was living in LA, and she was, up in Providence, Rhode Island. And so, we had to figure out, or we figured out that it just wasn't going to work,
Hmm.
because,
Sure, yeah.
and so we were friends though, and we stayed in touch for a while, but then 36 years later, we reconnected again, and it's just been fantastic. That was 4 years ago. So now it's 40 years ago, of course, that
Yeah.
we reconnected. Yeah. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Even a longer version of When Harry Met Sally, I guess, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it falls along those lines, though. Absolutely.
Sure, sure, sure. So, reading, from the beginning, coming up in I mean, what a time to grow up anyhow, the
Yeah.
60s,
Yeah.
and it's really just an amazing story back then about, how you were relating to everything that was going on in the world and what the climate
Right.
was like,
Yeah. I thought I would
generational
bring up,
gaps,
yeah,
that's,
I
yeah.
thought I'd bring up a lot of that because most people that are into the whole '80s thing and all that, they weren't around for the Vietnam War, of course, and they weren't
Yeah.
around for women's lib, the assassination, JFK, RFK, and MLK,
Hmm.
and so all these things were going on. It's so tumultuous at that period of time, in the '60s and into the '70s, and here at the time, FM was coming on heavy. It used to be
Hmm.
AM radio. That was it,
Yeah, yeah.
basically. And so FM radio was coming on strong, and of course, you only had the acetates. Um, you didn't have cassettes. You didn't. Later on came the betas and all that, but it's stuff. So, but a lot of people don't recognize, that are younger, all those things that were going on at that time, all the protests and everything. I
Hmm.
mean, it was an incredible time, musically, and just what was going on in the world, especially the States, with everything that was going on here.
Hmm.
Very tumultuous, like I said. So I wanted to put that in there just to let people know, kind of what the vibe was, and I got started, I saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964, and I just went, that's it, and that's what I wanted to. My oldest sister Mary, she got the Meet the Beatles album, and she was playing it constantly, and I would just listen with her, and it was so cool to hear those songs. And then what really got me into guitars is Jimi Hendrix when he came out with the Are You Experienced album in 1967, and I heard Purple Haze, and I went, that's it. That's
Hmm.
it, So I started out playing bass, in
Yeah.
1968, but then I switched over to guitar the day he died, September 18th, 1970. And then, I traded my bass in that day for a Stratocaster, and I've never turned back. It's been
Hmm.
it, ever since then.
Oh yeah, yeah. I would definitely say you didn't turn back.
Yeah.
I would say that certainly. I mean, with the things that you had accomplished, I mean, being asked to become, to go to the GIT, to become an
Yeah.
instructor there, just to have the mutual respect of the peers and the faculty there, and being told to get down here,
Yeah.
there was
Yeah,
a sense,
exactly.
you were definitely, sought after. And I mean, that just drips of respect right there.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was Don Mock, my teacher in Seattle.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was already playing professionally in Seattle. I started playing professionally in 1973.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was taking lessons with him. And then in 1977, I was actually playing in Montana. We played the whole Pacific Northwest. And uh, I tried to contact him in West Seattle Music where I used to take lessons from him. And the owner said, well, he's not here anymore, Steve. He's down at some new guitar school called the Guitar Institute of Technology down in Hollywood. And I went, what?
Hmm.
Guitar school? That sounds really cool. And
Yeah.
so I actually called up down. I got the number from information, called up, and I got him on the phone.
Hmm.
And he said, Steve, quit your band, sell your gear, and get your ass down here. Because I was one of his favorite students because he knew that I was practicing constantly on everything that he gave me.
Mhm.
And so I got down 3 months later, I was there, and the rest is history. I was going to go for the year and then come back to Seattle, but no, I stayed down there. I started doing studio work and playing in these different bands and everything. I wrote
Mhm.
my first book while I was going to the Guitar Institute of Technology. And what happened there was I was from the mid 70s, I was kind of into that two-headed technique, just messing around with it, because I'd
Mhm.
seen, Harvey Mandel doing it. And then there was another guy named Steve Buffington in Seattle that was really good at it. And so what I did was, I was playing around with it, but then when I went to the Guitar Institute in March of '78, there was the guy Emmett Chapman who invented the Chapman stick, where you play with your left hand on the bass strings and then your right hand on the higher register strings, where you play melodies and double
Mhm.
stops and triads and stuff like that. And so when he did the clinic, I was just fascinated by it, and I remember listening to him. What he said during the clinic was that I got so far with guitar that I had to come up with another instrument to accompany me. And
Mhm.
so after it, I handed him my guitar and I said, please show me something on what you were doing on guitar, before you came up with this instrument. And so he played this, like, he said, here's your left hand, you got this pentatonic scale going over here. And then he says, you take your right hand and play another position of that scale up here. And
Mhm.
I went, boom, that's it. And I understood exactly what he was talking about. So what I did was I wrote down, that was right at the beginning of the school year. So what I did was I came up with these graph papers with the guitar nectar on it. I hand drew everything. And then I used circles, squares, and triangles so that I know which hand was doing what.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
wrote
Yeah.
down everything that I was learning, all the scales, all the triads, the interval skips, different chord inversions and everything. And I just arpeggios and stuff. And I started writing everything down two-handed. So then I would keep a record of everything, and I'd be able to remember everything and go back and look at everything that I'd written. And then when I performed at the end of the year at the graduation ceremony at the Guitar Institute, there was Tommy Tedesco, who was the #1 studio guy from the 50s, 60s, and even into the 70s. And there was Howard Roberts, who wrote the curriculum. They saw me perform at the graduation ceremony, and they came up to me afterwards because I did a couple of jazz standards using just two hands, not using the pick at all. And they were fascinated by it. And so they said, we should write a book about this. And I said, I have like a stack of papers that big. I could easily write 3 or 4 books right now on it.
Mhm.
And so they laughed, and so they said, well, let's take you to meet our publisher, which was Dale Zdenek Publications. And so I met him the next day, and I had a publishing deal in like 10 minutes. And so then I put together the book, and
Mhm.
voila, there it was. That was my first book, and then I wrote 2 more books later on. It was
Mhm.
called The Right Touch, book 1, 2, and 3. So there's 3 of them.
Wow. Wow. So you had been doing that for a while, and then you had done some session work with Greg Lake, which I thought
Yeah.
I've always loved him too.
Oh
Yeah.
God, yeah. Great singer, great composer, great guitarist, bassist. I
Mhm.
mean, just everything he did. That band, there were certain bands, especially, I was into all the English bands. I was
Mhm.
into Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, and all that. And
Heck, yeah.
they were a progressive band, and those bands, they were just so incredibly dynamic and so talented. And
Oh yeah.
I was just in love with them, and so when I had the chance to play with him, I mean, that was just wow, hanging out with him. But man, there was the nasty sea going on there everywhere. It was cocaine. Back then, a lot of people don't know this, but they had on the end of the mixing console, on each end of a mixing console, like let's say it's an SSL board or a Neve, whatever
Mhm.
it may be. Okay, they had a little black mirror that was actually built in, and
Mhm.
it was for cocaine. And so I was in the studio session, and it was probably, I think, 1979.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was 1979, and he was, there was a pile of cocaine there, and he was snorting it, and his manager was snorting it, and everybody was going off, and so he asked me, and I said, no, no, oh, yeah, I won't. I start shaking on 1 cup of coffee. Here it is, right here. That's it. And so anyway, I laid down a bunch of tracks for him and everything, and he absolutely loved it. But then the record company, they had to like scratch the whole thing. They said start over, and Alex Grobe, his manager and everything, and so there was a lot of chaos going on. And so basically, I don't know whatever happened to those tracks that I cut, but it
Hmm.
wasn't only me. I think Steve Lukather played on some, and I
Oh
think
yeah, yeah.
Dean Parks did as well.
Hmm.
I mean, it was a bunch of people that he had coming in, but I don't know. I have no idea what happened to those tracks. It's one of those things, you
Hmm.
know. Like I even went in and played on some stuff that I later found out was for Donna Summer, but I didn't know,
Hmm.
you
Right,
know.
right.
Yeah, yeah, they just come in and you just say we want you to play a solo here, and then or a rhythm track here, and so I played for on a bunch of things that I never really know where it went to because they didn't want to tell me who it was I was actually whose album it was I was actually playing on. But it was interesting. I just went for it because it was great money, and I'll take as many of those as you can throw at me.
Hey, amen, amen to that. So,
Yeah.
yep. So, a couple of years later, you were working with some guys, and
Uh-huh.
one of your friends, happened to be jogging partners with David Lee Roth.
Right. Yeah. It was Kenny the drummer, and it was Kenny Richards, and he was the drummer. He was playing with a group called the Cool on A&M Records. Steve Plunkett was playing in the singer was playing a group called Silver Condor on Columbia Records. And then myself and Steve Isham, we were playing with a lady named Polly Penfield on Dreamland Records. And then Randy Rand was playing with Lita Ford at the time. But we
Mm.
got together on weekends and we had jam, and we made a videotape, or not a video, but a demo tape with Andy Johns producing it. He came down and he loved our stuff, so went to the studio and cut that. And that's what Kenny Richards played for David Lee Roth one day after they jogged. And David loved it, and he recognized the voice of Steve Plunkett. And so he knew who Steve Plunkett and Randy Rand were because Van Halen used to open for Wolfgang, which was Steve Plunkett and Randy Rand.
Oh,
He
okay,
was,
okay.
yeah. And so, when Kenny told him who they were, and then he told him my name too, and he recognized my name from all the stuff that I was doing around LA, and the book that I'd written and stuff like that. So he he asked us if we wanted to go open up for him on the 1884 tour. And Kenny says, well, we got all these other things going on, but we'd already recorded with all these other things. So we had some free time. So we wrote some more songs, and we went on tour with them. We thought we would just go out for a few months. And
Hmm.
next thing we know, we're getting all these offers from Geffen Warner Brothers, A&M, Epic Records, and all this. And it was RCA that made us a deal we couldn't refuse. And it was backstage at Madison Square Gardens. And so we decided to quit our other projects and sign with RCA and become an official band. And
Nice,
that's what
nice.
happened. And then next thing you know, they pulled us off the tour and brought us back into LA, and we started recording Sign In Please, the first album. So
Mm.
worked out very well.
Yeah, and I just as the story goes on, your first gig was in an arena
Yeah,
opening for Van Halen.
that's right.
The only
And
other comparable story that I had heard of that was, I think, maybe Mountain's maybe first or second gig was
uh-huh,
Woodstock.
right, right.
So hey, amen to that.
Yeah,
So
Leslie West, the guitarist vocalist from Mountain, would actually told me all about that.
yeah.
We did some clinics together, so he had some stories too. Believe me, I mean
Oh
he was
God,
he was full of them. So
I saw
uh,
them too. I
yeah,
saw them with Triumph a number of years.
I saw him
Yeah.
opening up for Jimi Hendrix.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
So that was a long time ago,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep, I saw him when I was old enough to see him. Like, I think it was 84 or 85, but
oh, okay,
they still
yeah,
brought it. I tell you, they didn't lose anything. They were
right,
just
yeah.
incredible. And so you really, and just again reading the book, the 84 tour with Van Halen, and then it seems like
Mhm.
you kind of went right from that to Aerosmith, Bryan Adams, Dio, Hart, Motley Crue. I mean, you did
Yeah.
probably in it looked like maybe a 3-year span. My
Yeah, it
God.
actually ended up being even a little bit longer than that. What we did was we just came back to LA to record another album and to shoot a couple videos for MTV back then, and so then the rest of the time we were just on tour all the time, and that was that. So I would say probably about a 4-year period where we were just constantly touring, 4 to 5 years actually. So, and that was, so we went from 84 on up to the very beginning of 84, actually. We formed in October of 83. That's when we officially formed. But then we went up to the very end of December of 1989. And that's when the whole grunge thing was coming in.
I know.
And we had done our 3 albums for RCA. That was done with. And so we were talking about Epic, about signing a 3-album deal with them. And they loved our demos and everything. By the way, those demos came out later in 1997 in an album called Missing Pieces. And so anyway, but they said, we don't know, we don't really know how to market you guys, because this whole, and we knew that, because we're listening to the radio and it's all grunge. I mean, the last band that really kind of slid under the radar there was Guns N' Roses at the very end of that. And they were a glam band that kind of turned into more of a raw edge, type of a groove and everything, and so that's what happened. And then the rest was just inundated with all the Seattle groups where I was from.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But looking at the bands that you tour, I mean, it's quite a spectrum of bands that you toured with. Van Halen, Aerosmith, Motley Crue, and then Bryan Adams, Heart, and then Dio.
Right.
Which kind of brings something to mind, and when you look at the tours that go around every summer, especially now.
Yeah.
In terms of things like that, you remind me a lot of Cheap Trick, that you could pair them with anybody and it works.
Yeah.
Just like you.
Right. And we could fit in. We weren't really heavy metal.
Right.
And we weren't like real poppy either. We were like somewhere in the middle, where we had some pretty hard edge sounding stuff, and then we had some ballads and stuff. But our main thing was just pure, rock and roll, with a different taste to it. And that's one of the reasons why we called it Autograph, because we had a signature sound, and so we didn't sound like anybody else. And so I thought that's what was really cool, because of course. Steve Plunkett sounded really different, and I sounded really different. There wasn't any guitar player that sounded quite like me either, and so everybody had their unique sound within the band, and when we put it all together, it just didn't sound like anything else.
It really didn't. It was a really unique sound, and it was definitely a sound of the 80s, but you can tell where it came from too.
Right, because we're all 70s guys.
Right.
When we toured with Van Halen, I was a little bit older than Eddie Van Halen. So, so I'm basically the same age as Michael and David too. Alex was the older one in that. And Steve Plunkett and Randy Rand, they were older than anybody else. And so was Steve Isham. So there was 3 people out of the band, out of Autograph, that were older than those guys. Like I said, they used to open up for Randy and Steve Plunkett. So, it goes to show that the age factor did come into play there.
Yep. Yeah, and the fact that the one thing you kind of remind me, saying that you were 70s guys that kind of transitioned into the 80s. Yours seemed pretty smooth, because if you look at, there were some acts back then that went from the 70s into the 80s, and it's just so cringeworthy. And especially, and a lot of it I think has to do with powers that be at the record companies, and the same thing really happens in movies and things like that too.
It does
non-creative,
have a lot to do with that.
Non-creative people get a hold of it, and they just run it into the ground. And that story's been told by so many acts that I've had on here, and we were talking before about how in this business. You're a great band, great musician, but your career, as well as a lot of others, have had peaks and valleys. We were talking about with Aerosmith and a number of the other ones, and some people just need to keep their damn fingers out of
everybody had to straighten up and get their act together, otherwise they were out. I mean, it was one of those things, do or die. And so that's what happened is they realized that they were going to have to keep touring because you get used to this lavish lifestyle.
Right, right.
And all that's gone. You like we spoke about this earlier. Once you stop selling records and you're not played on the radio as much, you know, then pretty much you're not making any money, you know, unless you're out there touring and selling merchandise. You see, but unless you have product that's on the radio currently and selling new albums, then you're kind of hitting rock bottom there. And so that's why a lot of these bands out there that are still touring, everybody thinks they love to do it. Some of them do love to do it, but a lot of them are just going, we have to do this.
Oh, yeah.
Unless they were invested when you had that initial, success, then you got to keep doing it, so.
Exactly. And then the other thing too is that, just because you're not being played on the radio, you're not like the first thing you hear when you turn on the radio, when you get in the car, that you're gone or that you're not doing anything or that, and that's not the case too. That's very inaccurate.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's very inaccurate. And the other thing too is that, and I hear this all the time, there's no good new music out there. I'm like, I feel like choking people, because, I play it on my show. And the thing is though, too, like a lot of the veteran bands out there, like the Deep Purples and the Kansas, they're putting out some of the best music they've ever put out.
Right. And that's the thing is, but their time had already come and went. So, that's the problem is trying to, get airplay and record sales, with your new material. It just doesn't happen because your heyday had already come and went. So, like what I did after Autograph split up is I went right into teaching clinics, and I was promoting my books, and but it was quite lucrative because of the fact that a lot of, since being in the guitar magazines and all that, I was pretty much known throughout the world, which I didn't know until I went and did these clinics. I did 25 different 20 different countries, 325 clinics. And so all these people, it was like sold out everywhere I went. And I'm going, how do you people know me? And it's like, I had no idea. And so it was a really pleasant surprise, and I felt really honored to have that, that kind of a show up, for all of these shows. So, it worked out really well.
One thing that I also wanted to mention here too, the time that we have left is, you performed all these arenas, all these stadiums and, clubs and everything else here.
Yeah.
But the one thing that you had kind of talked about, which I was kind of touched by, and I because I went through this myself, is that, towards the end, you also got your parents' approval.
Right. Exactly. That's when we played with Motley Crue. We played the Tacoma Dome just south of Seattle. And it was like a 20,000 seater. And it was the first time that my parents or, my brothers and sisters and my nieces and nephews, they ever saw me play. So they all show up there and I get them all backstage. And by this time, I'm a fairly well-known guitar player. We were a well-oiled machine at that point, so we went up there and we kicked ass, and it was a sold-out crowd, 2 nights sold out there. And so they saw me play and it was just like one of those things where, wow, it really affected me. I saw my dad out there and he was, you could see his bald head bopping around right where the mosh pit was. And I just cracked up. I was pointing at him and laughing on stage and everything. And he was out there going like this with everybody else. And I'm going, that's so cool.
It is.
That's just an epic moment right there, And I went to his house, and I saw this one back room that he had, and it was like a shrine to me, and that really affected me because I'm going like, wow. I remember I had sent him gold albums, from the U.S. and Canada and stuff, and so he had those. But he also had all these newspaper clippings and just everything. I don't even know where he found this stuff at, but he had it all framed and on all the walls in there, and I just had no idea. And I walked in there and I saw that. and just my dad kicked me out of the house, when I was 15. So
Right,
so
right.
here I am, and my dad's super proud of me. He's like a big fan,
Amazing.
And I just fell to the floor and I started crying, and it was just one of those moments where, wow, I really made it. I got my dad's approval.
Incredible.
Finally.
Yeah. So, in the time we have left, Steve, again, this is a great book, folks. Read it, please do. But we need to know where to find it. Where can you tell us about that? Or,
Okay, well, there's
how can you tell us where to find it? In other words,
you can find it on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, Bookshop.com. It's all over the place, but it actually comes out May 20th. Okay,
Right,
so that's the actual release date, but you can pre-order it now.
Okay.
And then it'll get shipped to you right away, or after the 20th. You know what I mean? So
right.
So it's. I think everybody will enjoy it. It's a really dynamic read. I mean, because there's humor in there. There's a lot of truthful things that I've never ever shared with anybody, even family members before.
Right.
And so it's kind of an expose of my whole life this far. You know what I mean? There's more to come. There'll probably be an addendum on this book eventually, but there's
wonderful.
More to come.
Well, thank you for being with us today, Steve. Confessions of a Rock Guitarist by Steve Lynch. And you know where to get it. Get out and read it. Folks, you're listening to The Back of the Rack, the Michael Spedden Show here on 97underground.com, Baltimore's Pure Rock Worldwide. And we will be back right after these words. Thanks again, Steve.
Oh, thank you for having me on, Michael.
And thanks again for listening to 97 Underground, the Michael Spedden interviews, and we hope you enjoyed today's show. Remember, download the free app from 97underground.com so you can listen to us wherever you go. The Back of the Rack, the Michael Spedden Show, can be heard on 97underground.com every Tuesday from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Listen anytime, anywhere.
Metal.
Worldwide metal 24/7. 97underground.com.